Yeah, how's it, everyone? Welcome. It's good to see so many people here. I think we are close to doubling our numbers. I mentioned that in the opening remarks yesterday. I think we sold double the amount of tickets this year compared to last year, which is fantastic. So thanks for coming. I'm the founder and chairman of Bitcoin Ekasi and obviously a co-organizer of the conference. Just a big shout out to KG. Last year, 2024, would not have happened without Machankura, who basically hosted the event and backstopped everything we did in terms of finances. So we are here today because of Machankura and the work KG has done. Thank you. If you were not here yesterday, so there's kind of two aspects to my talk, and the one already happened. The one aspect to my talk was Lutando's presentation yesterday, which gives you the personal story of Bitcoin Ekasi. I'm not going to give you the personal story. I'm going to give you a slight bit of an overview. I want to share my personal story, which led to the creation of this project. My own personal motivation for doing this is different from the personal motivations of the people like Lutando who are involved. We come from very different backgrounds, obviously. But I do have my own personal motivations for starting this project. I want to focus a little bit more on that and maybe give you a little bit of a logistical overview of what the project is and what it entails. So we have to go a little bit back in time, not that far back. So don't have to go all the way back. We can go back to 2008, which is not that long ago. I'm not that much older today than I was there. Two very important things happened in 2008. The first very important thing that happened in 2008 was I became aware of the problem that we face today. So there was this number thrown around $700 billion as the bailout needed to keep the financial system from collapsing. $700 billion was a number that nobody could fathom, and today that's practically small change. The US government goes into $1 trillion of debt in a matter of months. So in little over a decade, we've gone from not understanding what 700 billion means to writing off $1 trillion. It's really insanity on the next level if you really think about it. You should go and look at what $1 trillion looks like stacked up on top of each other. So that's the first thing that happened in 2008. I became aware of the scope of this problem, and I became aware of the very, very, very likely consequences. History is littered with examples of what happens when this goes wrong, and there is not one example of where this goes right. So, hoping for the best here is a really strategy. That's the first thing. The second thing that happened in 2008 is I met my wife, which plays a very important role in the story. You'll come to see why that is in a moment. Just to give you some brief background there, which also ties into the story. She is Russian, born in Ukraine. That was the Soviet Union back then. The eastern part of Ukraine is where she's from. Today, that's a pile of rubble because of things we all are aware of. This is important because when we got married and moved back to South Africa, we started a business, Unravel Surf Travel. We marketed South Africa as a tourism destination for Eastern Europe and Russia because of her connection to that part of the world. This is a brief overview of that timeline. We really kind of pioneered the surfing tourism industry for Russians and Eastern Europeans in South Africa. She was one of, if not the first Russian-speaking surf tour guide in South Africa. The market in South Africa was very well developed, but it was completely unmarketed in that part of the world. When we had Russians coming here for the first time, most people in Russia had to go on Google Maps and search where South Africa was. There was a lot of education involved back then, educating people from that part of the world to where we are. So anyway, 3 years later, I got introduced to Bitcoin by Bitcoin magazine, stumbled across it by accident, completely by accident. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to that publication. I'm not always on board with some of the things they've been doing lately. They've become a bit of a shitcoin magazine, unfortunately, but I am hugely grateful for the early print version of that magazine. The first copy of Bitcoin magazine I read was, I think Vitalik Buterin was still the editor of that magazine. I read one of his articles. Vitalik introduced me to Bitcoin before he launched the world's biggest shitcoin. Anyway, 2014, we all know what happened then. The Russian-Ukrainian conflict broke out for the first time with the annexation of Crimea. financial sanctions were imposed on some Russian banks, not all. And we adopted Bitcoin as a form of payment in our business in 2015 because of that. Only occasional payments in Bitcoin because only some banks were affected. Interesting note there, our very, very, very first Bitcoin payment from clients in March 2015 were from Ukrainian clients. And these were Ukrainians that banked in Russia. So it goes to show that these sanctions don't always work the way you think they're supposed to work. It is a reality on the ground. It is a fantasy to think that these things accomplish exactly what they're supposed to. 2015 to 2020, only occasional payments, and then obviously in February 2022, the war escalated. It never really stopped, by the way. It just escalated in 2022, turned into a full-blown war, although you're not allowed to call it that in Russia. You have to call it a military operation, but it is a war. And Bitcoin payments became our primary means of operation ever since. We take over 70% of payments in our business in Bitcoin today. So yeah, the color of the logo is not an accident. It is a lifeboat. It saved our business, and it's done that for many other people. So that's my background, my introduction to Bitcoin. The second part of the story starts with the surfer kids, which we started at the same time as the business. The thinking there was, well, we benefit from bringing tourists into South Africa. How can we give something back to South Africa? So we started a non-profit organization to try and teach kids from poor areas to surf. The idea is quite simple, really. We start a program where kids can benefit from that program, but tourists can also benefit from it, and it's a win-win situation. So what we give the kids is an after-school program that teaches them positive things about life, positive role models, and the program runs 5 days a week all year round. They spend more time with us than they do at school because we don't close for the holidays. And there's a whole bunch of those in South Africa. So surf lessons, daily meals, coaches, most of the coaches are from within the community to be positive role models for the kids. And the tourism business, no, that's too far. Can you go one back? No. Oops. We're stuck on that one. Anyway, so we'll take it from here. There's one slide before this that we missed, but anyway, the benefit to the business is that we can give tourists an authentic South African experience that they can't otherwise get. You know, so it's easy to come to South Africa and feel like you're in Europe. You really have to go and look for that other side of the country to find it. And it's not that easy to show tourists that in a way that's, you know, constructive and sustainable. So the non-profit gave our tourism business that. And they really appreciate it because they realized afterwards that this is an authentic experience. We would combine surf lessons between the kids and the tourists on 1 or 2 days during each 2-week trip. And that would give people exposure to what else is going on. No, this thing is going a bit nuts now. Anyway, yeah, so that's pretty much what we did until 2020. Then the insanity that I first noticed in 2008 really ramped up to a new level. Things went completely nuts. These numbers are old. This is a slightly outdated slide from last year. It looks way worse now. You know, it's only a small periphery on the outside that is in the green at all. The vast majority of countries around the world are completely indebted. They're up to their eyeballs in debt. There's no way out except to go further into debt. That's why they're doing it. Avoiding short-term pain and causing immeasurable harm in the long run. That's the inevitable outcome of this. You know, something like 40 to 50% of all dollars in existence around the world were printed in the last 4 years. And you just don't do that without consequences. We haven't seen the full-scale consequences of that yet, but that doesn't mean it's not going to come. History is pretty clear on that. You just have to take a brief look at history to see where this is headed. So this, that SV up there is supposed to be the El Salvadorian flag. So you know. Anyway, so that really motivated me to do something. Like, what can I do? I mean, I obviously understand Bitcoin, I understand the problem, but what can I do to offer Bitcoin as the solution? What can I contribute to the Bitcoin ecosystem? I can't write code, I'm not a developer, but I have the experience necessary in Bitcoin. I've got the background, I've been using it as a medium of exchange. I never adopted it to begin with as a store of value. I adopted it in 2015 as a medium of exchange. What we were interested in is getting value from one place to another. That's it. I wish I didn't have to sell all that Bitcoin in 2015 to run the business, but a little bit like the Bitcoin pizza guy in some way, if you think about it. Not quite as bad, but nearly there. Took that experience, took the inspiration from Bitcoin Beach. I came across that project in 2019. It's about a year after they started. I immediately recognized the potential for us to replicate what they had done. We had a similar platform. We had a community platform that had been trusted by the community for many years. We had coaches like Lutando who'd been working with the teachers, with the parents for many, many years. Combined all of that into one and built a Bitcoin adoption project. So, of course, what we do in the township is empowering people. But my personal motivation is to stop the psychopaths from driving this train off a cliff. That's what I'm here for. If I can do something to contribute to global Bitcoin adoption, I can do something to help stop this train wreck, or at least make it a little less worse than what it will inevitably be. I mean, every single form of money that can be debased and devalued throughout history has been debased and devalued throughout history. There is not a single exception of centrally issued money that has not been debased. The power and the temptation to do that is just too big. You cannot expect people to resist that temptation, and that's exactly what's happening now. I've had some pushback from using the word psychopaths. I have no regrets using that word. As far as I'm concerned, a psychopath is somebody who does something which they're aware of, which they know that they're busy with, which they know will lead to harm, and yet they keep doing it. It's not that complicated. I cannot have the ability, you cannot convince me that I have the ability to figure out what's going on here. And yet the people who run the world's largest central banks don't have that ability. I mean, you pick up one history book, you should be aware of what's happened. There are literally countless examples throughout history. Again and again and again and again and again and again, the same thing happens. People who issue money devalue that money to pay for things that they cannot afford. And they devalue the money that ordinary people use, and they go further and further into debt until eventually the currency is destroyed. Civilizations have been destroyed this way several times over, and there is not one time where this has happened and it has not turned out for the worse. So it's just not possible that the people in charge are not aware of what it means to be there in 2025. They must know this. So in my opinion, that's a fair assessment to call them a psychopath, because what else? I mean, what are we doing about it? Well, we're trying to drive Bitcoin adoption as a solution. If you can convince the masses to use a money that cannot be printed out of thin air, you kind of force the hand. And that's what I'm here for. Obviously, I've got a very, very keen interest in empowering the people that I work with on the ground in that particular township, but I realize that's only one township out of millions around the world. So my primary interest is to drive Bitcoin adoption globally. And if I can do that by building an example of how you could do that, and I'm not even the one that came up with the idea. I mean, we just copy-pasted what they did in El Salvador. But if we can do that and we can spread that message around the world and provide a blueprint for people of how do you adopt this, then that's my contribution towards making this a global money. And ultimately that will lead to a better world, because we'll take the ability of money printing out of the hands of powerful people who print money because they can, and it leads to horrible consequences. That's an oversimplification, obviously. There are smarter people than me that can explain this thing for you in technical details, but that's the bottom line. It's what it comes down to. And ultimately, at the end of the day, basically what it is, if we can use Bitcoin in these circumstances, then, the question is, well, what's your excuse? Because anyone can use it if we've been able to implement it. So, and that's not to be, sort of confrontational and challenging. It's just to say that it's very possible for you. Like, we've got 18 people working for our project who earn 100% of all their salaries in Bitcoin. I mean, so it should be doable for the average person if we're able to do that, and that hopefully inspires people to go out there and adopt Bitcoin as a form of money. What's the scale of the project? It's not actually that big. It's not meant to be that big. It's just meant to be an example for other people to go out and copy-paste. We're not trying to onboard thousands and thousands of people in that community. We're trying to build a small example of what is possible. But to give you an idea of the scale, there's only about 32 to 35 businesses that accept Bitcoin as payment in that township. To get a better idea, you've got to look at some numbers. So this is a sort of an overview. This will be available online if you want to look at those numbers in more detail. Some of this obviously is estimated. We can't be 100% for sure. Some of this is 100% accurate. But it's roughly between 400 and 500 people that use Bitcoin as everyday money on a daily, weekly, or a monthly basis. Those 400 to 500 people use Bitcoin themselves in a direct way for various reasons. One of the interesting things that I could mention maybe, because this could be quite abstract. So one of the things we do is we have these NFC cards that all the speakers got one of these. If you're a speaker, you should have received one of them. If you're not a speaker, you can come to me and I'll demonstrate to you how it works. So 41 children earning rewards. It's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down there in green. What that is, we've got the surf program for kids. If you attend more than 80% of your sessions for the month, we'll pay you a form of pocket money onto one of these cards. They can again go to the shops and they can spend it or they can save it. We've effectively banked between 40 and 60 kids. Bitcoin. Yeah, there we go. Thanks for the correction. We Bitcoined between 40 and 60 kids, but as you can imagine, it would have been entirely impossible to do this with any fiat sort of system. I mean, there's no birth certificates, there's spelling mistakes on the birth certificates, there's no proof of address, there's any number of problems that would prevent you from doing this with the fiat system. We built this in a matter of days. This is the 2.0 version. The 1.0 version took a long time. Jesse knows, he was there. He lived through the pain of setting the first system up. The second system was easy. We programmed 70 cards in 30 minutes. And the infrastructure costs for this is, I don't know, 300 rand a month. And this is one of the things. The kids would then earn their sats on a monthly basis, and they can go and spend this at the shops, or they can save it. Some of them save it, some of them spend it, some of them buy crap, some of them buy food for the house. But at the end of the day, it teaches them about money, it teaches them about being responsible, and it does that in a responsible form of money. It would have been entirely impossible with modern digital banking, and it would be in a security headache with cash. But with Bitcoin, we're able to do it in a very efficient, very quick, and very safe way. So anyway, that's just one of the ways in which we're introducing Bitcoin into the ecosystem. The last thing I'll mention is sort of looking forward. So this is the other thing that I'm involved with. Thanks to Bitcoin Beach, we've been able to help many other projects get off the ground. I'm involved in a global effort to try and replicate these projects around the world. I'm specifically focused on Africa. There are other people focused on other parts of the world. We've funded 14 projects throughout the continent, again, thanks to Bitcoin Beach and the donor that stands behind them. I have no idea who this person is. Neither does Bitcoin Beach. It's an anonymous donor. But thanks to that donor, we've been able to fund many, many circular economy projects around the world. I've been involved with these 14 projects personally. Some of them are here, most of them, I think. You should find these people, go and talk to them. Very interesting what they're doing. And that's basically the mission. The mission is to try and help create an explosion of circular economies around the world. We want to see people adopt Bitcoin as a daily form of money. And in many cases, that involves spending first. Saving comes later. What you have to understand is you often need to teach people how to spend the money first before you're going to get them to trust the money to get them to a point where they will use it as a form of savings. The way that privileged people think about Bitcoin is completely the opposite of that. The approach comes from the other direction when you're dealing with the global majority. It is the global minority that looks at this thing as a store of value. The global majority is going to look at it from a minimum exchange perspective. And yet, that debate goes on and on and on. Sorry, wrong one. There's one more slide. It's supposed to be. No. There we go. That's what I'll finish with. I think my time is up. If you want to know more about what we do, support.bitcoinekasi.com is our fundraising page. At the moment, we're working on a pretty big project. We are applying for land from the local government to build a new support center. We've been operating out of a temporary structure. Well, it's not temporary, it's an RDP house, a repurposed RDP house. We've been using that for the last 2 years. We are working on building a new center. We actually launched this a year ago. Because we're dealing with local government, we are still in the application phase a year later. But we are making progress. A big shout out to Tinus. I don't know if he's here. He's been working on this for tirelessly. 172 emails back and forth between himself and the municipality. We're still getting started. Anyway, and the last thing I'll say is if you're joining the road trip after the conference, we're going to visit this project. The idea is simply to allow people to come and verify for themselves what we're doing on the ground and go away with the idea to replicate it elsewhere and try and encourage Bitcoin adoption wherever you can. Use it. Thank you.